Hello students, I'm Aanchal Sharma, your educator for paper 1. We have been discussing PYQs and the concepts related to it in our course, the last lab. Now let us see other set of PYQs related to the topic communication. So this is the first question for you. The efficacy of written communication depends on. So you should know the word efficacy here, and in communication, one tip or one advice I can give you, read the questions very carefully, because just the twisting of the words would be seen, the concepts tend to remain the same. So the efficacy of written communication depends upon lengthy presentation, complex sentence structures, editing after writing, brevity in sentences, use of strong words, and effective use of words. So what do you think should be the correct answer? So the answer is C, which means C, D and F. C, D and F. So first of all, if we just read the question, then also you can find the answer. We are thinking here about the efficacy of written communication, or you can say how good you can say your written communication is. What all things can make your written communication up to the mark and nice? This is what this question is asking. So do you think lengthy presentation is a good thing when we talk about any written communication? So there are two kinds of communication. It can be oral or it can be written. So there is a difference between oral and written type of communication. So oral communication is when you are using words. But because of this, there can be fillers being used again and again, and also there can be the losing of the essence, because nothing is solidified and nothing is permanent. But when you write the things, then the things and the concepts become permanent. You have a proof that you said those things if you have the things in written form. So an oral telephonic conversation has less weightage as compared to the email that you wrote to your boss. Hence, you can say that written communication is a better communication. But yes, there is another characteristics, that is, you can say it as a disadvantage also, because in a written communication, the feedback is sometimes delayed, or it is delayed for a longer period of time as compared to the oral communication. Because oral communication is a simultaneous communication that is happening, right? So because you get your answers right away. Hence, written can take a lot of time. But you should have a good presentation when you talk about the written communication. If you know that the other person would understand the words properly, whatever you are using, then the communication is effective. Then it is helpful. You have to avoid using jargons. You have to avoid using a lot of technical words, and you have to make it as concise and as simple as possible. So here you have your homework, and you have to write in the comment section the 4 S's of communication. I would write the 4 S of communication is your homework. Then let us discuss here. So do you think the lengthy presentation is a good thing? Definitely not, because if you present the things in a lengthy manner, then it will lose its essence. So A will definitely not be the right answer. That means you can strike out A. Then comes B, complex sentence structures. So I told you, if you use a lot of complex structures, if you use a lot of jargons, then the communication would be not that affected as it would be. So definitely this won't be a correct answer. So wherever you find B, you can strike it out. Then comes the word editing after writing. Yes, we also commit a lot of mistakes when we write things. So if you edit it, it is going to make your written part more strong, more beautiful, and more concise. That means C would be there. So C would be the right. Wherever you have C, you can choose that answer. Then we have brevity in sentences. Whatever you are saying are not that long sentences, and whatever you are trying to say is in a brevity form. You can say that you are trying to communicate with someone something very important, and you are using just in 2 sentences, you can complete what you are trying to say rather than writing a paragraph about it. So definitely brevity is using good words, not technical words. Good words and writing in a concise manner. So D would definitely be there. Then comes the use of strong words. Rather than using strong words, simple and good words should be used. So E won't be the answer, and you can strike down this option. And effective use of words is very important. What is effective use of words? You should know that there are synonyms, antonyms. One word can have different meanings. Different meanings to one word tend to make it difficult to understand. So you have to use effective and good words so that the written communication can be beautified. Hence, you can say that this would be the correct answer. Then let us discuss about the 7 C's of communication. So there are these 7 C's. If you follow these 7 C's, either in written communication or in oral or in just anywhere you are talking to someone, then the communication would be an effective communication. So the first is correct. You have to be correct in whatever you are talking. You should have all the facts and whatever you're trying to communicate checked. Then comes complete. You cannot communicate with someone in a half-ended statements. So I cannot say, come, where should I come, what should I do? All of these things will create a problem in my communication process. So my communication should be complete. Then it should be concrete. It should be concrete, it should be solid, it should be correct. Then comes concise. Rather than using 5 words for just a single sentence, I can complete my communication in just one sentence in a most beautiful and effective manner. So it should be concise. Then consideration. Empathy and sympathy and considering others is very important. Using a lot of jargons will create a problem. So it is advisable just to write in a simple manner so that you know the other person can understand you. Then comes your courteousness. Again, as I told you, you should know that the other person is on the same page as you are and the other person would understand it. What if you're trying to communicate in Hindi but you know that the other person is not comfortable with that language? So this will make your communication less effective. Then clear. One very important characteristic of a good communication is that it should be clear and it should be correct. Correct and clear would make your communication the most effective communication. So these are the 7 C's of communication and it's a PYQ also. UGC keeps on asking this question. So your homework is the 4 S. Then this question. Now this question is a very interesting question. With just this question today, I will be discussing all the models of communication because I know a lot of students will face problem. Also consolidating the information about each and every model is very difficult. So today in this class, I will tell you about each and every model. Let us see the question first. So Aristotle, Shannon and Weaver, Wilbur and Schramm. Then we have David Berlos. And there are communication concepts. So we have SMCR model, that is sender, message, channel, receiver, and again this is the model. Then we have the circular communication. Then we have the speaker-centered communication and then top-down linear communication. So what do you think would be the correct answer? So the answer is C. That means A would be joined with 3. Aristotle model is a speaker-centered model. Then B with 4. That means Shannon and Weaver model is a top-down linear model. Then we have Wilbur and Schramm and this model is a circular kind of model. And then we have David Berlos. David Berlos, and it is very important, it is a SMCR model. That means sender, message, channel and receiver. This is what is the full form of SMCR. Now let us see at the different models of communication. So before diving into it, you should all know that there are 3 models of communication. The first is the linear model of communication. Then we have the interactive models of communication. And at the end, we have the transactional model of communication. Now, what is a linear model? In simple words, you can say when there is no feedback and only the sender and the receiver are there, then it is called as a linear type model. So here is a sender, here is a receiver, and they are talking. Not in fact this arrow, only this is what is happening because the receiver is not responding to the sender. This means that there is no feedback and it is only a linear model. So it is one directional, unidirectional model. Hence it is called as a linear model. Then comes interactive model. So the words also say it is interactive. That means you will have feedback here. So there is the sender there is the receiver, and the receiver will also respond to the sender. This means that there is one characteristic that is most important here, that is the feedback. Right? This means that the feedback is present here. Then comes the last model, that is the transactional model. So this is basically used in classroom. And how can you differentiate between your transactional model and your interactive model? So the interactive model is something like this. You have the sender, you have the receiver, and the receiver will respond, the sender will respond. Hence, you can say your sender is an encoder and decoder both, and your receiver is a decoder and encoder both. And this happens in a very continuous process and a very faster rate. So here the rate is important. Of course, in the interactive model also, you find that the sender and receiver are communicating with one another and they are talking. So there will be encoding, decoding and switching of the places. But the rate at which this is happening, this changes when we talk about the transactional model. So in the transactional model, the rate at which they will talk to each other and they will respond to each other and give feedback is much larger as compared to the interactive model. Then we have the linear model, and the linear model is a one-way interaction where the feedback is not present. So the linear is the primary communication model, whereas the transactional model is formed based on the linear model. So of course, the starting point is always the linear model. The sender communicates with the receiver without receiving a feedback when we talk about the linear model. It also represents a one-way process of communication. Many scholars have established this linear model, and let us look at these models. So a few models under the linear model are Aristotle models of communication, that is around 300 BC. He came up with this model. Then we have the Lasswell's model of communication. He came up with this in 1948. Then we have Shannon and Weaver in 1949. And then we have the Berlos SNCR model in 1960. Now let us quickly discuss. So here is the sender, here is the receiver, and there is no feedback. So this is a linear kind of model, a one-way communication model. So we have Aristotle's model of communication. You can pause your videos and read the statements. I will be only telling you the important points out of it. So the Aristotle's model of communication refers to the communication model with the speaker, the speech, the occasion and the audience, and the most important thing, the effect on the audience. So here we have the speaker, speech, occasion, audience and the effect that is created. So about in 300 BC, Aristotle developed this linear communication where he focused that always there is a sender who is going to send the message. Now there is no feedback given, but there should be an effect that is created on the audience. So if you see a politician who is giving a speech, so what is basically required in this kind of contribution or this communication? Here you see that the speaker is talking and there is an effect that is created on the audience. There is never someone who will come and stand that yes, the communication was complete, the feedback is never given. But the effect, just by nodding of the heads or just by smiling, you'll come to know that there was an impact. So whenever we talk about debate sessions, this is how Aristotle model is used there. So Aristotle's communication model consists of 5 primary communication elements. There is always a speaker, a speech, an occasion, and there is an audience and there is an effect. So what is my speaker? Speaker is a politician here in the example I gave you. Speech is what he or she is trying to communicate. Occasion can be any occasion. Say they are just giving a speech because of a rally or elections coming. Then there is audience, the one who he will look at when he is trying to create an impact, and there is an effect that he will see that he has created. So this is basically how the model works. There is a speaker, there is a speech, there is always an occasion, there is an audience, and then there is an effect created. Positive, negative, but there is always an effect created. Then we have Lasswell's model of communication. So the political scientist and Professor Harold Lasswell introduced Lasswell's communication model in 1948. It is a linear model and it represents one-way type of communication. Whenever we talk about this model, in this model we'll see that there are few questions asked. How can you say that the communication was complete? If all these questions are asked, you will say that you have done your part properly. Who is talking? Who is a communicator? Who says and what is being said? Says what? So this is the second question. Who says what? In which channel? To whom? And with what effect? So these are the few questions that Lasswell talked about. Then there was no reference given to feedback here because it is a linear one-way kind of communication. So he is basically also focusing on who is talking, what is something that you are communicating, and what will be the effect. Then we have the Shannon and Weaver model. Now this is an important read. Shannon and Weaver model of communication was established by two American scholars, Shannon and Weaver, in 1949. The Shannon and Weaver model is also called as the mother of all communication models because after the starting off or the introduction by Shannon and Weaver, others used this model. So basically a model is not something that is true. It is just a replica of what you think can happen. So these communication models somewhere can pop, all these models can pop in between. They are not just the solid crux of what we are trying to say. And there is always research happening. So there was one scholar who started to talk about the communication model. Then there will be another and he'll research on what already has been done. That is why with centuries we are coming up with communication models and something or the other is changing. So one can specify the importance of feedback, other can specify the importance of culture. So that just depends which model is talking on which grounds. So here we have the Shannon and Weaver did not include feedback. Therefore, it is a linear kind of model. However, it was Norbert Wiener who added feedback to this model, right? So this is the criticism, and this person, Norbert, criticized Shannon and Weaver model and introduced the concept of feedback. Though this is called as the mother of all the models, but the concept of feedback was not that relevant during that time. At first, this model was designed to articulate the technical communication process only. Later, it changed. Later, it was actually discussing all the 6 elements that are essential for communication. What all are these elements? The information source, then it is transmitted, then what do you have? Then you have the channel, then you have the receiver, and then you have the destination. So this is what Shannon and Weaver were talking about. So here, when we were matching, so we discussed, so we said Shannon and Weaver model is a linear kind of model and it is moving from top to bottom, right? So this is why we matched it with the 4th option. And when we talk about Aristotle is a speaker-centered model because basically the speaker is important and the next is the effect that the speaker has created. So with just knowing 2 of these, you can easily solve the question also. But let us move further. Okay, so he was basically talking about all these 6 elements. He said that there is always a source. From the source material, you will create a message. Then you will transmit the message using some channel. So channel is important. There will be a receiver who will receive the message and there will be a final destination, that means his mind, where the things would go. And there is no discussion about the feedback. Then we have Berlos model of communication, a very important model because they ask this model a lot of time. Now this, I believe, is the most simple type of model also. Berlos said that this is an SMCR model where S stands for the source, M for the message, C for the channel and R for the receiver. So David Berlos developed this SMCR model in 1960. It is also known as David Berlos SMCR model of communication. Berlos invented this model based on the Shannon and Weaver model. This is what I was saying. There will be different scholars who will use the theory given by Shannon and Weaver. That is why their model is called as mother of all communication models. Then there are four elements that David Berlos is discussing. As we know, the source, the message, the channel, the receiver. And Berlos focused on both. Now, why is this model so important? Because he is bringing the concept of the verbal communication and the non-verbal communication elements. So he said that in a communication model, there is the non-verbal part and there is the verbal part as well. So these are the few things that he is talking about. He said that there is always a source. This is the person who is the sender. He is the source, he is thinking. So there are always some set of communication skills that will decide how can you talk, how effectively can you communicate. Then there is some attitude, and attitude will influence your communication, knowledge, social system, the social background where you come from, and the culture. All of these non-verbal and verbal aspects are important and will decide to know that the communication is effective or not. So what is the role of the sender? The sender can articulate the communication part properly, encode the message properly when all of these things are done. Then there is a message. The message should be having a good content, good elements, good treatment, good structure and good code. Then what is the channel? Channel can be anything like hearing, seeing, touching, smelling and tasting. So we are talking about non-verbal also. So when your mother cooks food for you, you will taste it and you will say that it was really nice. So what is it? This is a method of communicating. Showing love, she'll cook you good food. So this is what? This is a gesture and you are communicating here. So it can be hearing, seeing, touching, smelling and tasting. Then there is the receiver. Now one thing I want you to note is that, see, the source and the receiver, that means the sender and the receiver have the same set of skills. Why is that important? Because according to all the theorists, they will say that you should have something in common. To communicate, it is very important that you are on the same page. You know that the other person will understand what you are trying to say. Hence, the receiver and the sender should have the good set of skills like communication skills, attitude, knowledge, social system and culture. Then comes the interactive models. Now the interactive model is a two-way model. So it is a two-way model of communication with feedback written there. However, the feedback is not that simultaneous, provided it can be slow and it can be an indirect type of communication feedback. Sometimes the communication can be linear if the receivers do not reply. So when they reply late, it will become basically a interactive model. So the interactive model of communication indicates meditated and internet-based communication. So because in internet, you receive message a little late. So we have Osgood-Schramm's model, Westley's model and Maclean's model. Now let us see. So what is basically interactive model? In an interactive model, there is the sender who will encode, and this is the person who is going to tell the things to the other person. Then there is the decoding that will be done by the receiver. There is always a physical context, whatever you are talking. There is the message and there is a feedback and there is ever presence of the noise. Then we have Osgood and Schramm's model. The Osgood-Schramm model provides a two-way form of communication where Wilbur-Schramm adopted the concept and the theory of another scientist, that is Osgood. So Osgood did this, started with this theory, and we will see that Wilbur-Schramm will take upon these theories. So Osgood proposed that the communication process is a circular model rather than the linear model. So this is what Wilbur and Schramm is also saying, and this is what we had in the question also. So we had which communication model is circular in nature. So we have Wilbur and Schramm model that is in a circular motion. So I hope you will remember and you will never forget it now that it is Osgood who started with this model, but more important was Wilbur-Schramm because he developed the theory further. And according to these theories, the communication is a circular model because the sender and the receiver keep on changing their position and feedback is very important. So the person simultaneously plays the role of a sender and the receiver in the message. So the person receives the message, interprets it, and provides the feedback. Therefore, it is known as the Osgood-Schramm model of communication. There are some elements, and according to him, there is the interpreter, there is an encoder, there is a decoding, and there is message. Let us look at the model. So this is the model that Schramm and Osgood together worked on. They said that there is always a transaction, or you can say an interaction between, not transaction, interaction between the two people, and they change their role. So I start communicating with the person S, right? So this person is basically someone who is communicating with me, but here I am telling something to him, right? So he is person S here. So I'll say something that I will be on leave, and he will respond, okay, you can surely take a leave. I will take a leave on Saturday then, if you're taking tomorrow. So what is it? We are trying to communicate with one another. So I am encoding the things. That means I am packaging the things properly. The other person will decode and understand that yes, Aanchal wants a leave. Then what will happen? He will also contribute in the conversation. He'll say that, okay, I will also take a leave on Saturday if you are taking a leave tomorrow. So that means he will also become an encoder, because now he is talking. So all the role he will be taking when he becomes the encoder. He'll package the things properly so that I understand it, and then at that time I will become the decoder. This means that there is a circular model. The message keeps on moving like this. The sender will become the interpreter, the decoder, and the encoder, and same goes for the receiver. So this is a circular model. Then we have Westley and Maclean's model. Westley and Maclean's interactive model of communication examines communication process between the sender and the receiver. Westley and Maclean's communication model was adopted from the Newcomb's communication model and the changes that are made in the management model by Levins. So it represents the two-way communication. Now again, one homework that I want to give you. You have to read more about the Newcomb's model. Now they will never ask you, I don't think they'll ask you the question that is this further and in this greater detail, but you should know about it. So read a little bit about the Newcomb's model of communication, because Westley and Maclean use that model. So the feedback, according to them, is very indirect. It can be slow when we talk about the mass communication. And according to Westley and Maclean, A is here the sender and B represents the receiver. C represents the mass media, and this is an interactive process that we are talking. Now let us see this model. So there is this X that you can see. This is X1, this is X2, X3, this is A, C and B, and this is F. Now let us see what is X here. So X are basically the environmental factors. So there are your cultural background or your just environmental factors where you live. This is basically the factor. X1 is basically the sensory experience that you have with the model. So at your home, you have a certain way of living that will influence you. Positive, negative, that depends. But that will influence you. The set of friends that you have, the society, the culture that you live in will influence you in a particular manner. So all these X1s are the experience, the sensory experience that you have. So this becomes X1. This is A, who is the sender. Say this is Aanchal. So I am the one who is influenced by how my work, how my culture is, what my customs are, how my work structure is, and what is the basic values that my mother and father told me. So this is what, these are the factors that will affect me, and I come with all these set of notions. Then this is X2, and X2 is the object orientation. So what I want to talk becomes an orientation. Here comes C. C is the gateway. Now what is a gateway? Another PYQ. Gateway is basically filtering or a barrier in between your communication. So I want to communicate with B about something very important, but I know that I cannot disclose everything because my boss has told me not to tell it. So what will I do? I will filter my conversation. So this filtration of conversation is called as the gateway. So I will use the gatekeeping, and gateway is there. So this process is called as gatekeeping. Something would be meant to be dropped here and some of the stuff would be carried forward. Hence, I would have B. B is the receiver who will receive the messages, and there can be feedbacks here in between. So this is what your model says, that according to the linear model, there will be only no feedback, but in our interactive model, there will be feedback. It can be delayed. It can be no response, then it will become a linear model. And this is what Westley is also saying, that you are impacted by your communication or your cultures somewhere down the line. These environmental factors will affect you. And this, he is also talking about mass communication. So when you are ever talking to someone else in a social media or anything, you come with a set of notions. You will filter some of the things. That filtering would be gatekeeping, and then you will communicate. The other person would also perceive according to the culture, according to the notions they keep, and then the communication would be complete. But the feedback that you will give me on YouTube would depend, right? If you have been just right in front of me, the feedback would have been different. Then it would have been a transactional model. But right now it will be an interactive because there can be a delayed feedback. Then another model, this is a transactional model of communication. So what do you mean by transactional? So the transactional model of communication is again a two-way type of communication model with an immediate and a spontaneous feedback. So the spontaneous feedback is essential component whenever we talk about the transactional model. So the communication process will not become a transaction model if there is no feedback. That means quick feedbacks should always be there. So the feedback is very direct. It is very fast. The receiver is compelled to provide instant feedbacks. If you are right in front of me and I being a teacher will ask you questions, you will respond, then I will also respond to something. This becomes a transactional model. So in a classroom model, you will say that the classroom is a transactional model because the role reversal is taking in a faster rate and the communication is spontaneous. On YouTube, when we interact, when I ask you some question, you will write it in a comment section whenever you are watching the video. That means a delayed feedback would be there. This will be an interactive model. And I'm just coming here and teaching you and just me being important. And I am the one who is telling you all the things according to myself, giving you a lecture. Then it would be a linear model. So the feedback is very direct. It is very fast. So this is basically how the communication process would happen. There is a sender, there is a receiver. We all come with our fields of experiences and we will interact, right? We will interact and I will be telling you a few things. There will always be a channel to give feedback and to talk as well. And there will be the ever presence of the noise again. Now we have Eugene White's model of communication. And this is not that important. We'll just read it. So Eugene White's model is one of the crucial transactional model, not important for our exam, model that was introduced in 1960. According to Eugene White's model, communication is again a circular process and this is an interactive process that will happen between a sender and the receiver. Most essential element of this communication is the feedback that is continuous in nature. Therefore, it is the transactional model of communication. There are 8 stages in an oral communication, which he is basically talking about. He said that there is always thinking, then we symbolize thing, we express something, then we transfer it or we transmit it. Someone would receive, decode, and then feedbacking is done. So feedback would be given. Also, there is monitoring in between. Monitoring so that there is no barrier coming in between. So the communication is a very sequential interactive process. So they can, if UGC wants to make a paper really tough, they can also ask about this sequence, right? So you can of course not challenge them. So read it, learn that there is first thinking, there is symbolizing, expressing, transmitting, receiving, decoding, feedbacking, also monitoring is seen in this kind of communication. So this is a model that he is giving. You'll think, you'll symbolize, you'll express, you'll transmit, receiver would receive it, there will be decoding, there will be feedbacking, there would be monitoring done again. Then we have the dance Helical model. Now, this is a model that was given by Frank Dance, and this was introduced in 1967. This is called as a helical model because he is looking at the structure of a helican. Helican is like a spiral. So, any communication, according to him, starts in a very small structure. It starts with a small circle. When the communication share becomes more, the little communication about themselves that they were doing in the beginning, this will become more and more. So the communication expands and the communicator will expand her or his boundaries when the people share about their personal information, about their relationships. Their relationship grows gradually. So this is how the communication would move when we go and reach at the top. So they start with normal circles, and this is how your communication model would increase. This is a Dance helical structure. This structure is called as helical. This is why he called this model as a helical model of communication. So we always start with here when we are young, or you can say first day of your classroom and two friends are sitting together. So you don't know anything about one another. You'll just start with talking, sharing your name, telling about your family maybe and your goals. Gradually, you will move upward. And with each day, with each passing day, you tend to know more about one another and you will interact more with one another. Hence, this is called as a helical structure. Like a spiral, you are sharing more and more each day. So this is a helical structure that the Dance helical model talks about. This shows that you completely become open with a particular person when you gradually talk to them. So this is a spontaneous reaction. This feedback will be very spontaneous. Hence, it is a transactional model. Then we have the Barlunds transaction model. And so we have Dean Barlund introduced this transaction model, and the author formed this model based on the public, private and also the behavioral clues. Now in this model, the only thing is important that according to him, there are cues coming in between. Cues are small fillers that will form in between, and you will catch those clues or those things that come popping in between, and then you'll gradually talk to another person. So Barlund's transaction model basically talks about the multi-layered communication process with the presence of feedback. The sender and the receiver exchange the role and they will be communicating with one another. Therefore, the sender and the receiver of the message, they occur and they change their place reciprocately between the sender and the receiver. The 8 elements of Barlund's communication model are the person, the encoding, decoding, public cues that would be given to talk, because I am saying I really like chocolate. Someone else would say, oh, chocolates, I also like that. This is what cues come in between. You have something common to talk about. Hence, we both know that we are chocolate lovers. Let us talk more about chocolate. So we will be starting to talk, we will be talking about something that is in common. This is some cues that will come in between when you are talking to someone. There are some private cues, there are some behavioral cues, there are verbal cues, there are non-verbal behavior cues, and there is a message. So this is a model, and you don't have to learn this model. This is just that there is a person, there is a decoding also done, there is encoding also done, completely simultaneously, and you don't even know when the other thing would start. There are some cues that come in between, and your personality and the talking that is happening between the other person is what will happen when you follow these cues. And all these public, these private, these non-verbal, these verbal cues will make you good person to talk to. You can take another example. You sit with another person and you know that person is very punctual, and you also have this characteristic, and you know that this virtue is very important, and you like this virtue about that other person. What will happen? Because of this non-verbal trait of the timing or the punctuality that he has, that means, and the study is called as, the study of time is known as chronomics, right? So you know that this is a non-verbal trait and you like that trait. So you start a conversation related to that trait. You know that you can gel with another person because you have a same set of skills, same set of values. So this is what? This is a public cues, this is private, non-verbal, verbal behavior cues. All of these will make you more compatible with another person, and hence the communication can happen. So this is another transactional model. And we are done with the models. The last question that I have with you, which is also a very important concept, is right in front of you. The synonymous communication takes place through which of the following techniques? Then, not synonymous, sorry, synchronous. So, synchronous communication takes place through which of the following technologies? Now, what is synchronous communication? You should know the difference between synchronous and asynchronous communication. So, what is this? First of all, let us see the options. There is video chat, there is virtual classrooms, there is audio conferencing, Wikipedia or wikis, and then we have the electronic mail. So before seeing the answer, let us see what is synchronous, what is asynchronous communication. So synchronous communication is a communication like video conferencing, chats, audio calls, and many more. Basically, a synchronous communication is a communication that happens at the same time. There is no delay feedback, and here you are talking at that very moment. That time, that place is common to you all, whoever you are discussing the thing with. So if I am talking on a telephonic conversation with another person, I know when I'll respond, the other person will also say something. So this is completely, you guys are on the same page. You guys are discussing the same thing. There is no delay in feedback. There is proper conversation that is happening. So this conversation will have no hindrance related to the time zones, related to the timings, related to the places where you are. It is just a simultaneous transactional model. But what about asynchronous? Asynchronous is a model that does not happen at the same time. When I'm teaching in the class and I know you can respond, when I'm teaching live, that becomes a synchronous communication. But when I'm teaching on YouTube, I know that you will respond a little late, or maybe there will be a very long break between the communication that can happen, between the comments that you will write. So this is what this becomes an asynchronous communication. So there are a few examples. Video conferencing, chat, and audio calls are all type of synchronous communication, while emails, pre-recorded videos, documents, talking on docs. So this is what? This is a asynchronous communication, because the time can be a barrier here. So what will be the right answer? The right answer would be A. How? Video chats, you are at the same place, you are talking, and the feedback is also fast. Then you have virtual classes, you can see your teacher and the students, interaction would be more. Then audio conferencing, of course, you can give the feedback simultaneously. But Wikipedia, that of course, that is a very delayed feedback. And then there is an electronic email. You can answer that email, respond to that email, maybe 5 days later, 3 days later. That means quick feedback is not present. Hence, it is an asynchronous communication. So, E and D are wrong options. E, and wherever you find D, that means it is so easy, you have your answer, that is A, right? So this is how you can mark all the questions by just knowing few things about what the question is asking. So I hope I tried my level best to tell you all the important concepts related to the models of communication, and this is also very important, synchronous communication and asynchronous communication. So I hope you understood the class. If not, you can write it in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching the video. Keep on studying and keep on smiling. Thank you.